Greetings, SOSW viewers. Happy 2023 to you all. Hope your new year has started strong. And here we are with the first video from SOSW this year. And we are covering episodes 1, 2, and 3 of The Bad Batch Season 2. And with me is...
the always fantastic, with the impressive collection, Captain Henson.
We decided to wait before doing this podcast because the first 2 episodes came out back to back. Then for a few days there was silence because we weren't sure when we'd be able to do this, and by the time we knew we would be able to do it, 3rd episode was out. So history is repeating itself, and we're doing a 3 for 1. So without any further ado, let's begin with The Bad Batch Season 2 Episode 1, Spoils of War. Hunter, Wrecker, and Echo are seen retrieving cargo on the surface of some kind of beach planet, and they're fighting off the natural habitat of this planet, that being some crabs. Meanwhile, Omega is being tutored by Tech on literally every single intricacy imaginable of every Imperial ship you can think of. When Omega sees the trouble that Wrecker, Echo, and Hunter are in, she decides to get involved using her energy crossbow to fight off the crabs. Then they return to Ord Mantell and give Sid the cargo that they were tasked with retrieving. Then they are given a new mission, that being to retrieve a war chest from Sereno, the homeworld of Count Dooku. Hunter is initially against it due to the heavy Imperial occupation on the planet, but he eventually relents. So the Bad Batch travel to Sereno and they divide the attention of the Imperial forces. However, Wrecker gives the group away by knocking out a standard trooper. After some fighting, Hunter and Wrecker are stuck in Count Dooku's palace. Then they escape by Wrecker hammering at the elevator shaft hatch in the floor of the main palace room. Meanwhile, Echo, Omega, and Tech are stuck on a war chest that is loaded onto a ship, but then when the troopers piloting said ship realize there are intruders aboard, they eject all of the escape pods, and eventually the war chest cargo crate therein also gets offloaded and it starts falling through the atmosphere. And that leads us straight into episode 2, Ruins of War. And it literally picks up where Spoils of War leaves off, with the warship cargo crate falling through the atmosphere, and Tech's leg is actually crushed by one of the crates inside. Then the emergency engines kick in, but it's not the best help imaginable, because they stop right on the edge of a cliff face. Then they spot an elderly gentleman in the trees who goes by the name of Romar. After calming initial hostilities, Romar guides them to his home after Tech explains that he detected it with the radar device that he's got. Meanwhile, Hunter and Wrecker continue their struggle against Imperial forces. Then, once in his home, Romar explains to the other 3 that Dooku's quest for power affected not just outside worlds, but it also had a massive impact on Sereno itself. Omega then starts to bond with Romar, and he eventually shows Tech a datachron containing cultural history of Sereno, and Tech eventually succeeds in fixing it. However, Omega can't stop thinking about the actual objective, that being to bring back the war chest to Sid, and she slips away. After noticing this, Echo eventually catches up, and so do some Imperials, which puts him and Omega in a very dangerous situation, of course. And Omega then explains that she feels guilty following having overheard Hunter and Echo's conversation in the previous episode, because she now believes the group's current life situation is her fault. As such, she wants to make things better for them. However, Echo assures her that they have no regrets bringing her on board. This gives Omega the inner strength to leave the war chest's gold behind. Then Romar and Tech show up. They deal with some remaining Imperials who were targeting them, and Hunter and Wrecker pick up the rest of the group in the Marauder, but Romar chooses to stay behind. Then Captain Wilco and Admiral Rampart have a conversation about the Bad Batch being confirmed as the thieves, which Rampart initially disbelieves because he thinks they died during the Topoka City bombing from the end of Season 1. However, Wilco assures Rampart that the Bad Batch were the ones responsible, and Rampart decides, prior to writing the report, that he will leave the Bad Batch out of said report. However, Captain Wilco would much rather be honest about what happened. And this results in Rampart killing Wilco, and then he just leaves Sereno. So that's the first 2 episodes. Thoughts, Henson?
So, strong start so far to the season. As someone who enjoyed the previous season of the show, I came into this expecting to like it, and that's what I got. I think the character interactions are still as strong as ever. I appreciate the time jump. Always nice to have that. And these 2 episodes started what I think might be a trend for this season of doing TCW better than TCW itself. TCW was meant to show us the complexities of war. How there can be heroes and villains on both sides. How just because one side claims to be good doesn't mean they aren't above doing bad shit, and vice versa. And showing how war can affect the civilian sector. And while we certainly did get some of that in that show, here it does a better job at going into detail on it. Here we have Rampart even saying that, yeah, no, Dooku also screwed us over, his own people. We never saw anything like that in TCW. We didn't really see any civilian separatists in that show. Here we have just that. Also, speaking of TCW, seeing Dooku's room again brought back some memories.
Being completely honest, I'm not the biggest fan of the very opening scene with taking the cargo and fighting off the crabs on the beach planet. I know that Bad Batch has done some kind of silly things before, but for me that was just a little bit too silly. The rest of the episode, though, I think is fantastic. The best parts of the previous season, as you said, are still as strong as ever here. Of course, TCW references in the form of Count Dooku's palace coming back. Much like yourself, that was a bit of a nostalgia trip, I guess. We also see, and I think this is probably one of the biggest takeaways from these 2 episodes, that Omega is becoming significantly more confident dealing with the hostile forces up front, and we also see that her intellect is growing. She's becoming more her own warrior now.
Yes, and one of my favorite scenes so far in the season is when Rampart kills our
Captain
main
Wilco.
clone guy there. You see,
Yeah,
this is the
Captain
type
Wilco.
of shit I like to see. How far some of these assholes are willing to go just to basically stay out of the line of sight from higher up. If higher ups find out that you fucked up on something, oh, you are dead. We see how the Empire works, is what I'm saying, effectively.
And actually, just to sort of piggyback off that point for a second. Now, Season 1 did do quite a lot with exploring interpersonal relationships within the Empire, and we also see how the Empire's presence was affecting the galaxy at large, like with the introduction of the chain codes and things like that. Do you think this season will focus a lot more on the interpersonal relationships within the Empire?
From the looks of it, yes.
And Captain Wilco, you can't help but feel sympathy for him and want to give him some credit for wanting to be honest about the mission report by the end of the 2nd episode, which in a way just makes you hate Rampart even more.
It's one of those things where you can understand where he's coming from, but it's still, scummy piece of shit is a scummy piece of shit.
And if anything, this show also does a better job, even more so than TCW, of highlighting how expendable the clones are, especially now that the Empire is the bee's knees.
That should have been in TCW, period. But obviously, it wasn't to give everyone personalities, which, again, can of worms. But now we're finally getting it. Now, actually, now that I think about it, I believe not having the clones be expendable in TCW is a problem. I mean, just on the basis of what the EU did was better, in my opinion. But really think about it. If the clones were seen as expendable in TCW, which, time of the Republic, and then we cut to the Empire, well, nothing's changed. I think that better illustrates that the Republic had basically become the Empire by the time we get to the Clone Wars.
So, same organization, different name, is what you're saying.
Basically. Because let's keep in mind here, by the time we get to the end of the Clone Wars, the Republic ain't squeaky clean and hadn't been for centuries, thousands of years. I think TCW should have done more with showing just how fucked the Republic was. Still, though, I guess better late than never. Alright, so is there anything left to say on these 2 episodes?
Can't think of anything off the top of my head, you?
No.
So in that case, we go straight on to episode 3, The Solitary Clone. This episode begins with some Imperials visiting the planet Desix, and the governor of Desix, Tawny Ames, and the Imperial governor who is leading this handful of forces is trying to overthrow Governor Ames. However, Governor Ames refuses to give up her position, obviously, when the Imperials make it clear that they will not recognize Desix as an independent planet, and Governor Ames corners the Imperials. Then we cut to Coruscant, and we see Crosshair wake up in his sleeping quarters, and he goes to sit in the mess hall of these headquarters, and he sits at the same table as a couple of clones, and they actually get up and walk away, keeping in with the reputation that the Bad Batch had pre-Empire. Then Crosshair is instructed over the loudspeaker to speak with Vice Admiral Rampart, and Crosshair is tasked with rescuing the Imperial Governor, who is currently being held captive by Governor Ames, and it's revealed that Crosshair is part of a squad being led by
Commander fucking Cody.
After a quick conversation, they board the vessel, and Cody quickly runs through the mission with his squad. But upon entering Desix's atmosphere, their vessel is shot down by battle droids guarding the entrance of this fortress, and this crash from the ship being shot down does kill some of the troopers, but the remaining members of this squad, including Crosshair and Cody obviously, do pull through and work together to take out the droids guarding the front entrance. Then they enter Desix's city, and even find some civilians hiding away from the Imperial forces, and they also get reacquainted with a couple of familiar droid types, the Droidicas and Commando droids.
And don't forget the tactical droid.
Yes. A TX unit was actually instructing the droids throughout this battle. Then after some more fighting, Crosshair sees the aforementioned tactical droid within the main bell tower of Desix. Crosshair and Cody then go straight there, and there's some more fighting against commando droids, and after being strangled by a commando droid, Crosshair tosses Cody a mirror, which Cody then throws up, and we actually get a repeat of what happened in episode 15 of season 1, with Crosshair using the mirror trick that he used against most of his former squad, against these commando droids. And the bullet ricochet, as you'd expect with Crosshair, was absolutely perfect, taking out all remaining commando droids in the bell tower, and even the tactical droid. Crosshair and Cody make their way into the main office, and they find Governor Ames with the Imperial Governor at gunpoint. Cody actually tries to reason with Governor Amos in a peaceful manner, and after a conversation that was a couple of minutes at least, Amos lets the Imperial Governor go. However, despite the Imperial Governor ordering her death, Cody doesn't kill her. Crosshair is the one that does it. Following Amos's death, all of Desix's civilians then become slaves to the Empire, and we can see that Cody isn't happy about that. Upon their return to base, Cody actually asks Crosshair if the Empire really are making things better in the galaxy. Crosshair, for all intents and purposes, gives the stone cold response that you'd expect. We're soldiers, we do what's right. However, Cody then says that, unlike droids, clones have the power to be independent thinkers. However, because of that, they also have to live with their decisions. Then the ending is actually a borderline repeat of the opening to the episode. Crosshair wakes up the next day. He actually suits up this time around, though. He goes to the mess hall and he's sat on his own and is instructed over the loudspeaker to report to Rampart. And Rampart actually praises Crosshair for his efforts in rescuing the Imperial Governor and tells him to report to CC 1226 for his next mission. But then Crosshair mentions Cody, and Rampart says that by the laws of the Empire, Cody has gone AWOL due to not going through with murdering Governor Amos, and Rampart says that it's funny how the comrades of Crosshair's old life keep disappearing. Due to Crosshair's hesitance in giving a reply, Rampart asks if Crosshair has a problem, to which Crosshair's response is simply, "No, sir." Then Rampart dismisses Crosshair, and the episode ends with him just walking down the hall, fully armoured. And that's how the episode ends.
So, as always, when it comes to Star Wars, whenever we get battle droids, always makes me giddy. And of course, anytime we get TCW anything, despite my complicated feelings of that show, again, makes me giddy. I mean, commando droids, tactical droid. I mean, this really felt like a clone centric TCW episode. And of course, that's always great in my book.
Yeah, one of the things that I actually said to Henson before we started recording, to me, this episode actually made me think of, I think it was one of the early episodes from Rebel Season 3, where Kanan, Ezra, and Rex are taking on a battalion of old battle droids that went undiscovered the entirety of the Clone Wars. This episode reminded me a great deal of that. What do you think of Governor Amos?
She did nothing wrong. I would say she didn't go far enough. Should have killed the fuckbag.
Yeah.
And the fact that she believed Cody, I mean, come on. I mean, sure, he meant it. We know that, but as far as she knows, this guy is just a stooge for the Empire. And he's just saying this stuff to lower her guard. I really expected him to be the one to kill her. I thought that was going to be the twist, that he says all this shit, but in the end, he's still the guy who ordered his men to shoot down Kenobi. But weirdly enough, no. He has free thought and seems to be in complete control of his actions. So we'll have to see where that goes. I guess he might have removed his chip. That, or more likely, it might have malfunctioned. We're still going to need an explanation on what the hell's happening with him.
It looks like, based on Cody's hesitance, especially at the end of the episode, he's going to be under much closer watch from the Imperial higher-ups from now on.
We also get a reference to the TCW episode Heroes on Both Sides, which was nice. That was like the one instance where we see separatist senators that weren't, the big names of like your Newt Gunrays or Watt Tambors. And again, just like with the previous two episodes, this show does a better job at doing TCW than TCW did. Actually seeing the separatists and their citizens. Is there anything else you got?
I can't think of anything else worthy of note, can you?
No, I think we said all we can.
Okay then, so on to the conclusion. So these 3 episodes were a very strong start. We've had the Bad Batch and Sid again. The character dynamics are still as strong as ever. We got to see Crosshair again, and I didn't think we were going to see him or Commander Cody this early on this season. In fact, Cody, I wasn't sure if we'd see him at all. The TCW nostalgia, even more so with Sereno, as Henson said, seeing more heroic separatists again. And I suppose it's kind of a broken record because I think we complimented it several times in season 1, but the quality of the animation, absolutely gorgeous. I kid you not, the first shot of the first episode, the wide shot of the beach planet, that looked amazing.
Yeah, I'm certainly glad Star Wars animation has kept the aesthetic of TCW Season 7. Because that was like peak. Well, mostly the Siege of Mandalore arc, but that obviously had a higher budget, and for good reason. But still, I mean, the quality of animation from the first season of Bad Batch, Tales of the Jedi, and this, like, top tier. I never thought Rebels looked great, and Resistance, just everything about that show wasn't good. So I really hope they just stick with this aesthetic moving forward, and maybe occasionally breaking into other things like Visions, but as someone who likes consistency, yeah, just stick with this. As for my overall thoughts, like Luke said, strong start, keeping up the momentum from the previous season, and although not brought up, I did watch Andor. We just didn't do any State of Star Wars videos on it. Fucking loved Andor, and loving this season of Bad Batch so far. Of course, this is never gonna get me back into the new canon full force. I'm done with that. But, you know, when it comes to the mainstream stuff, sure, I'll watch it, and if I enjoy it, great. If I don't, well, I got the EU, why the hell should I care? But, again, great start. Can't wait to see where this goes.
So, with that, we come to the end of our first State of Star Wars video for the new year, and we have discussed Bad Batch Season 2, Episodes 1, 2, and 3. I have been your host, Jedi Knight Luke, with
the always memorable and the best member of State of Star Wars, Captain Henson.
And we will see you guys next time. May the Force be with you.
See ya.